All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining us today. I'm Joe Walls. I'm a psychotherapist at My Therapy NYC, and welcome to my webinar, Fight Better, Improving Conflict Resolution with Effective Communication Skills. Today, we're going to explore how we can better navigate the conflicts that arise in our relationships by approaching disagreements with more effective communication. Now, we're going to explore these issues through the lens of a romantic partnership, but the information and skills can apply to any types of relationships, including friends, family members, and work colleagues. We'll start by talking a little bit about conflict and arguments in relationships. But first, let's start off with that poll question that you saw when you entered. So go ahead and take a second to fill that out or click on that if you haven't yet. And we'll give folks a minute to do that. And then we'll see what we came up with. I do want to let everyone know also we are recording, but we will not show anyone's faces, and we will stop the recording before the question and answer portion at the end. So no one will be on the recording of this. Okay, well, let's take a look at the results. What did everyone think? So let's see. Most people thought that couples argue multiple times per week, and following that was once a week, and then either once a day or once a month. No one said never, so that's pretty good. And then multiple times a year, and no one saying multiple times a month. Well, let's look at some of the results of that poll. So according to a 2022 YouGov poll, the number of arguments couples engage in were split about three ways. About 32% claimed they argue only once a few times in a year, 28% said it was once or multiple times in a month, and 30% said they argue at least once per month. This supports what relationship researchers and couples therapists can confirm. There is no set number of arguments for a healthy couple. Each couple is different, with different temperaments and circumstances, all of which can influence the frequency of disagreements. However, one thing is certain: every couple disagrees. Now, you might be thinking, no way, I know that one couple that's so perfectly made for each other that they never fight. Well, they may not have screaming matches, but I can guarantee that they do disagree. Maybe they don't do it in public or talk about it later, but every couple disagrees. Well, every healthy couple disagrees. It's possible that a couple may have such limited communication that they never address disagreements at all, but that can only last so long before it'll likely lead to the relationship ending. And anyhow, you argue with your partner sometimes, right? That's why you're here, to learn some skills to make that go more smoothly. So let's continue with another question. What topics do you think American couples argue about most? So we have cheating or jealousy, communication styles, drug or alcohol use, household chores, how you argue, money, parenting, politics, relationships with immediate and extended family, religion, sex, tone of voice, or attitude. What are your thoughts about this? Okay, let's take a look at the results. Okay, well, it sounds like most people think that money is a major topic of argument. Following up with that, we have a tie for household chores and communication styles, and then a couple that we didn't really think at all. So let's take a look at the results. It's kind of a little surprising. According to the same YouGov poll, the most common topic for arguments among American couples is, with 39% selecting the option, it's tone of voice or attitude. Most people said that they often are arguing about the tone of voice or the attitude their partner's taking. The next closest, and probably less surprising, was money, with 28% of couples choosing that. But then a close third was communication styles, right above household chores with 21%. And then that was followed by how you argue with 13%, closely followed by sex with 12%. So between the argument topics of tone of voice or attitude, communication styles, and how you argue. Not only do most couples argue, but many of them are arguing about arguing. So with that in mind, before we talk about how to resolve conflict, let's explore some of the problematic ways we communicate that can lead to or exacerbate conflict. I'd like to start off and talk about the four horsemen of the relationship apocalypse. Now, one of the most accomplished couples therapists and relationship researchers is Dr. John Gottman. In the early 1980s, he devised a framework for observing and discussing the main communication problems arising between romantic partners. He called them the four horsemen of the relationship apocalypse. Let's watch a quick video and get a brief introduction to this concept.
I am Tyra Banks, and I am on the set with Karen Miller.
Thanks, Tyra. We will skip your commercial.
You're so selfish.
What an idiot.
It's not my fault we're always late.
Forget it.
Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Dr. John Gottman calls these negative communication patterns the four horsemen of the apocalypse because they'll lead to the end of your relationship. In fact, he can predict this relationship failure with over 90% accuracy if the behavior isn't changed. So what can you do? Well, at the Gottman Institute, we understand you might not even know you're communicating this way, or you might not know how to control it. But if you practice the following four research-based antidotes, there is hope for your future. Criticism attacks the character of the recipient instead of focusing on a specific behavior. The antidote to criticism is to talk about your feelings using I statements, then express a positive need. Contempt is an expression of superiority that comes out as sarcasm, cynicism, name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, mockery, and hostile humor. Contempt is the greatest predictor of relationship failure and must be eliminated. The antidote to contempt is to treat one another with respect and build a culture of appreciation within the relationship. Defensiveness is self-protection through righteous indignation or playing the victim. Defensiveness never solves the problem and is really just an underhanded way of blaming your partner. The antidote to defensiveness is to accept responsibility, even if only for part of the conflict. Stonewalling occurs when the listener withdraws from the conversation without resolving anything. It takes time for the negativity created by the first three horsemen to result in stonewalling, but when it does, it can become a habit. The antidote to stonewalling is to break for at least 20 minutes, calm down, then return to the conversation. Spare your relationship from certain destruction. Learn more about eliminating the four horsemen by...
So, actually, it skipped ahead a little bit. Let me go back for a second. Okay. Now that we have a general understanding about the four horsemen, let's go into it in a little more detail. As the video outlined, the four horsemen of the relationship apocalypse are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. Also, I want to highlight another point the video briefly mentioned. These patterns of interaction can be fatal to a relationship, and Gottman became so adept at recognizing them that by the late 1990s, he was able to observe a couple talking to one another for just 3 minutes and then predict with 90% accuracy whether they would divorce within the next 6 years based on how the horsemen appeared. Fortunately, by recognizing the horsemen and using the antidotes that Gottman suggested, couples are able to avoid their own relationship apocalypse. Now let's look a little more deeply at each of the horsemen, how they manifest, and what we can do to shift our communication in a healthier direction. The first horseman is criticism. Criticism arises when one partner attacks the character or personality of the other, rather than the underlying action, behavior, or situation that they're actually upset about. For example, one partner may be unhappy that the other often leaves dirty dishes in the sink. Rather than discussing this behavior and how the first partner would like it to change, they would instead say something like the other partner is thoughtless or lazy or selfish. This approach to conflict can be problematic for a variety of reasons. First, when we criticize our partner, we're likely painting with too wide a brush and speaking hyperbolically. One type of action, even repeated, doesn't necessarily fully represent someone's character. Additionally, criticism most often sounds like a direct attack. This can prompt the receiving partner to shut down or become defensive. An attack on your partner's character also doesn't in any way move you toward a plan for resolving the situation. So, what is the antidote to criticism? Gottman referred to beginning an interaction with criticism as a harsh startup. and suggested a gentle startup in the alternative. Rather than beginning with a you statement like, "You are so lazy," we should reframe the issue and start with an I statement that shares something about what we're feeling. The "I feel" statement should then be followed by an underlying positive need, possibly combined with a solution or plan. Most often, our complaints with our partner arise out of some need that we have. It may be necessary to take some time to identify that need when you're working to overcome your tendency toward criticism. We want to lead with that feeling we have and then gently express the need we've identified. Going back to our dishes example, we might say something like, "I tend to feel overwhelmed and rushed in the morning, and I need some order and space to do everything that I need to accomplish." The next horseman is defensiveness. Defensiveness can often arise as a direct result of the first horseman, criticism. Defensiveness usually manifests as taking on the role of the victim and feeling self-righteous or indignant, and then turning the blame back on the other partner. For example, after being criticized for not doing the dishes, the second partner might come back with something like, "Well, you always get home so late and make such a big mess making dinner that it takes forever to clean up when I'm already exhausted." As you can probably tell, leading with criticism and meeting it with defensiveness often leads to a spiral of attacks without any connection or hope of resolution. The antidote for defensiveness is for you to take responsibility. Our natural tendency when we feel that we did something wrong can be defensiveness. So we need to actively try to hear and understand the feelings our partner is having and what they are saying that they need. If we find we've done something wrong, apologizing might be relatively easy. So we can do that and take responsibility for the situation. However, sometimes the situation may be more connected to something we don't fully understand. It might be connected to us not really realizing the feelings or needs of our partner ahead of time, and that we only understand them after the discussion. We still have the opportunity here, though, to avoid defensiveness and move toward validating our partner's feelings and taking our share of the responsibility for not understanding the feelings or the underlying needs earlier. This could look like saying, "I'm sorry. I didn't realize how hectic you feel in the mornings. I know I'm exhausted at night, but maybe we can work together to find a plan for cleaning the dishes that works for both of us." Contempt. The next horseman is contempt, and it's considered the most detrimental toward relationships. Contempt for a partner manifests as an attack on their self-worth through either verbal or nonverbal behavior, with the goal of abusing or insulting them. These behaviors often reveal an underlying dislike or disdain that may be growing toward a partner, feelings that can overshadow and ultimately suffocate love, compassion, and connection. Verbal behaviors displaying contempt include things like direct insults, mean-spirited jokes, name-calling, and sarcasm. Nonverbal behaviors often include eye-rolling, sneering, and making other annoyed and dismissive faces toward and in reaction to your partner. An example of contempt coming through in an argument could include saying something like, "I didn't realize you weren't smart enough to recognize how busy I am in the morning, but I guess that tracks. Gosh, and you were so close to winning that Partner of the Year award too," followed by an eye roll. Here you can see that we have an insult or name calling in saying that the partner wasn't smart enough. Then we have sarcasm or a mean-spirited joke, followed by the nonverbal sign of contempt in the eye rolling. That sort of comment is likely to continue to ramp up the conflict, likely leading to defensiveness or other similar attacks. The main antidote to contempt is to work toward cultivating a culture of appreciation with your partner. Try to focus on the positive attributes and actions of your partner. What were the things that attracted you to them? What do you admire about them? What are the ways they demonstrate their love and care for you? Reflect on the gratitude that you feel for them, and try to find ways to express that appreciation, both directly with words of appreciation and through actions. Don't take the little things that they do for granted. Even if they do something you think they are supposed to do, if you appreciate it, let them know. Also, work toward speaking with kindness, respect, and love, even when you're angry with one another. Be mindful about what you're really upset about during the fights. Is it a misunderstanding, an oversight, or maybe something not even related to the situation or the relationship? Try to notice if you're holding on to unhelpful or negative stories about your partner or the relationship that just aren't accurate. If you are, work to rewrite those stories. For couples working to increase their appreciation for each other, I'll often recommend that they start to make it a practice of sharing at least one thing every day they appreciate or are grateful for about the other person. You can set an alarm and then call or text your partner sharing that day's gratitude. Now, some folks push back about this or bristle at what they perceive as an artificiality of this approach. And sure, it may feel weird to have to reach out like this, but the things you choose should be thoughtful and honest. And ultimately, we're working toward cultivating a new habit of expressions of gratitude, and habits only form through practice. The fourth horseman is stonewalling. Stonewalling is when one partner refuses to engage with the other, ending the conversation or argument and removing themselves from the conflict. Sometimes this can be connected to the idea of the silent treatment. The stonewalling partner may do this when they feel particularly overwhelmed with emotion during an argument. They may also use stonewalling in an effort to avoid the other partner becoming angrier. Stonewalling may also become the go-to action if a partner feels hopeless about any argument actually leading to any resolution, or hopeless that the other partner will respect them or take them seriously. It can be used as a way to express disapproval or dissatisfaction by creating distance and separation, but it doesn't actually clearly express anything in conversation. The partner facing the stonewalling will often interpret the shutting down as rejection and evidence that they're unloved or not respected enough to try to find a resolution. This can lead to deeper feelings of resentment and disconnection. Because stonewalling often is a result of a partner feeling overwhelmed, the primary antidote is for the stonewalling partner to practice psychological self-soothing. The overwhelmed partner needs to work on finding ways to monitor their emotional activation level to recognize those feelings as they arise. When that happens in an argument or conversation, they need to be able to ask for a timeout. However, if stonewalling has become a common occurrence between the partners, the other partner may hear the request for a timeout as the beginning of more stonewalling, which could lead them to double down and try to fight harder. If this is a common dynamic, it's important to establish a new approach. When the timeout is requested, it needs to be accompanied by a time to resume the conversation when everyone has had the opportunity to calm down. The pausing partner could say something like, "I realize I'm becoming too overwhelmed right now, and I need to call a timeout. I'm going to go for a walk, and then we can pick back up in an hour." The couple needs to make sure, though, that they actually resume the conversation later, or this new dynamic won't take hold, and the other partner will not feel safe in letting the timeouts take place. During the timeout, the overwhelmed partner should try to find a solo activity that can be calming and can facilitate the regulation of the upsetting emotion. This may be a walk, like in the example, or listening to music, or taking a bath, or anything else that can help the partner recenter and be ready to return to the conversation in a more peaceful state of mind, ready to communicate in a more connected and collaborative manner. So now that we've discussed some of the pitfalls in communication that can lead to or worsen conflict, let's take a look at conflict more directly itself. Now, returning to our old pal, John Gottman, the relationship researcher proposed that the conflict that couples encounter can be divided into two main categories: solvable problems and perpetual problems. He also asserted that around 31% of conflicts that couples face are solvable, with the other 69% being perpetual. Now, this may seem a little discouraging, but don't lose hope. Let's look a little closer at these types of conflict and how to navigate them. Solvable conflicts, as the name suggests, are relatively simple. They're usually about a specific topic, usually something that's situational. They could be disagreements about household chores, or where to go on vacation, or how to discipline the children, or almost anything else that could come up on a day-to-day basis. Solvable problems are usually about what they appear to be about on their face, with no subtext or confusing baggage in tow or bigger issues at play. To actually solve the solvable problems, the couple just needs to remain calm and to communicate clearly. Usually those issues can be resolved and the resolution can be maintained. So sounds great, right? Okay, good. That leaves us with perpetual problems. Perpetual conflicts, as I mentioned before, tend to be the bulk of what couples argue about. These generally arise around some sort of fundamental difference between partners. This might be a personality or temperament difference, or a difference in core beliefs, values, or needs. They can often include things like differing opinions about politics, or child rearing, or how much alone time we need, or sex, or money, or a variety of other topics. As the name suggests, perpetual problems don't really go away. They're essentially irreconcilable differences that will probably always exist between partners. The perpetual problems are different for each couple. Also, it's worth noting that what is a perpetual problem for one couple could be a solvable problem for another couple. So now when we're faced with a perpetual problem, we could continually try to change the other person, but that's often an exercise in futility. The better option, for the sake of the relationship, is to cope with the differences and find areas of compromise. However, before we talk about doing that, I want to briefly mention how perpetual problems could turn into gridlocked perpetual problems. While every couple has perpetual conflicts, when those aren't properly managed, they can become gridlocked perpetual conflicts. These are more heated and more adversarial, accumulating baggage and negative emotion. Couples will notice that they aren't connecting or making any progress toward resolution, which can lead to contempt, defensiveness, frustration, resentment, and withdrawing from each other. Couples may become more inclined to avoid these issues, but since they don't go away on their own, they can continue to act as a wedge in the relationship. And you may have noticed this type of interaction is filled with opportunities for the four horsemen we discussed before to rear their ugly heads. Now, we can work on gridlock problems to move them back toward just standard perpetual problems with some of the same techniques, but working on them before they become gridlocked is much easier. So now that we've established the types of conflict that we may be dealing with, let's explore the ways we can resolve and manage conflict. First, we want to be approaching these conversations and interactions with as much emotional intelligence and sensitivity as possible. Bringing affection, connection, humor, patience, and respect into the conversation will help it go much more smoothly and successfully. I always recommend that we enter any of these sorts of interactions with kindness and curiosity as our guiding principles. And really, we can keep those in mind for most of the interactions that we have in life generally. Trying to show kindness to our partner and to really be curious about what they're thinking and feeling will always be helpful. This mindset will help as we explore the art of compromise. Now again, returning to John Gottman, he conceptualized a person's position in any conflict as a pair of ovals, one inside the other. The inner oval represents our area of inflexibility. What falls in here is usually connected to a core value or need that we have. The outer oval is the area of flexibility. This is where we will likely find our points of compromise. Now, as you might guess, we want to strive to have the inner oval as small as possible and the outer as large as possible. Each partner should work to define these areas for themselves, asking the following questions. What are my areas of inflexibility? What are the core needs or principles that I cannot yield on or compromise on? And remember, make this area as small as possible. The other question is, what are my areas of greater flexibility? What parts of the issue am I more willing to shift on? Remembering to make that as large as possible. Sometimes when exploring the areas of inflexibility, it might be helpful to explore whether you might have bigger issues at play connected to the core needs or values that you find connected to your position. Try to ask yourself whether there might be a story behind your thoughts and feelings there, whether your position connects to something from your childhood or background in general. You may also want to ask yourself if there's a bigger dream that you have for yourself or your life connected to those areas of inflexibility. Once you've established the inflexible and flexible areas, you can work toward a temporary compromise by discussing the following points. First, explain why the inflexible areas are so important to you and try to understand your partners. Explain the core beliefs, feelings, and values connected to the issue and try to understand your partners. Explain your flexible areas and try to understand your partners. Explore what parts of the issue you agree about. Explore the common goals that you have related to the issue. What things do you and your partner both want to achieve that connect to this issue? Explore ways those goals might be accomplished. Explore how you might reach a temporary compromise. Explore what feelings you both might share regarding the issue. And explore how you can help each other understand your related core needs. If you go through all of these questions, chances are you're going to be a lot closer to reaching a compromise. So after discussing these points, try to find a compromise that keeps in mind the needs, values, and dreams that you and your partner both expressed. Once you find that, you'll want to put the compromise into practice. But then you need to be sure that you reevaluate it at some point to see whether you're both as happy with the compromise as possible, or whether you want to shift part of it. Now, during all of this compromise, there's going to be a lot of talking between you and your partner. So let's explore some of the ways to make that communication as effective as possible. When speaking. When you're speaking during the compromise discussions, you want to keep a few things in mind. Thinking back to the first horseman, try to avoid criticism, blaming, and you statements. Focus on those I statements we discussed earlier, which will help you focus on expressing your feelings about the situation and the need you have connected to it. Feelings and needs should be a main focus of what you are sharing. When you're listening, you want to fully focus on the speaker. Put aside your agenda and goals. Listen and really hear what the speaker is sharing about their feelings, needs, and perspectives about the issue. Repeat what you hear. Name the feelings that are shared and try to experience them yourself too. You also want to validate what the speaker is sharing and explain why their feelings and needs make sense to you. Also, it's okay to ask questions as you're listening if that helps aid in you fully understanding what your partner is saying. During the conversation, while you're talking, try to give your partner the benefit of the doubt and assume their best intentions. This can be difficult if the issue has been particularly contentious or if you've had numerous unsuccessful discussions or arguments. But let's try to stay focused on the discussion at hand and say what we mean and try to hear what the partner is really saying. Try to find a willingness to accept the things that you're not able to change about your partner. They may always run a little late when you're ready to leave. They may always have a desire to save more money than you do. They may leave the bathroom a little messier than you like. Those things may not change, so you may have to just accept them. During your discussion, especially if this topic has become heated before, be willing to take breaks to self-soothe and calm down. As we discussed in relation to the stonewalling horseman, as long as we make a commitment to return to the conversation, taking breaks can be a very helpful tool for managing our emotions during challenging discussions. And remember, you both love each other. Even if you aren't agreeing on something, you still love this person. So keep that in mind and let that guide your words and actions. So now that we've learned the main framework for managing conflict and for finding compromise, let's look at a few other techniques that can help improve our communication so we can get ahead of arguments. Weekly discussion time. As we discussed, roughly 70% of conflicts are perpetual conflicts, with the potential to arise again and again. Along with those conflicts, relationships often also just have a lot of important topics that need to be discussed. With this in mind, it can be really helpful to designate a specific block of time each week for sitting down together as a couple without any interruptions and away from any distractions so you can have those discussions. Whether it's about where to go on vacation, whether you want to have kids, what color to paint the living room, or any other topic, having a set day and time for those discussions can help in managing them. Now, that way they won't take over the rest of your time together if you know you have a specific time to discuss them. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't talk about things at other times, but once you've established your discussion time, you can also give each other permission to pause bigger conversations that come up throughout the week and ask to save them for your meeting time. Of course, exceptions may need to be made for some situations and emergencies, but having the set time can really free you up to enjoy each other's company a lot more during the rest of the week and let you both know that the important conversations and issues will be dealt with. Now, if you're saving things to talk about during your weekly meeting, it probably makes sense that pretty soon you'll need to create a list to keep track of what topics you'll need to discuss. There's actually another technique that I like to recommend to help manage these conversations and to give each partner a role in choosing what topics will be discussed and when. So first, you'll probably naturally have a master list that you're adding topics to, but I recommend that each partner creates their own list, which they'll then share with the other partner. Using an app to create the list, like Google's Keep app, it'll allow you each to easily share your lists. Each partner will then put topics on their own list that they personally want to make time to discuss. Often these might be topics that the other partner is less eager to talk about. These topics might include visiting the in-laws or budgeting and saving money or plans for dividing housework. During the weekly meeting time, that you've set aside to discuss, you'll want to talk about at least one item from each of the personal lists. However, this is where the unique approach comes into play. Each partner will choose a topic from the other partner's list. This ensures that both partners have a say in what's discussed. So say one partner has a list that includes finances, chore distribution, and visiting the in-laws. Partner two may not be excited about discussing any of the topics, but knows that the talk about the in-laws will be the easiest. So after a long week at work, it might seem like the topic partner two is most ready to have. This collaborative process allows both partners to participate in and feel safer before, during, and after the conversations. Also, the list creator knows that all of the topics will eventually be covered, while the chooser gets to have a say in when each topic is discussed, so they can best be prepared to have them. No one's surprised or blindsided by any topic, but rather has access to the list and is able to reflect on any of the topics before engaging in the conversation. This also could give each partner time to connect to any underlying values or needs that could help them prepare for compromise, as we discussed before. I've seen this list exchange approach work for a lot of couples. Another important activity I recommend to couples, and which can be part of the weekly meeting, is the debrief. When some time has passed after a conversation or discussion or an argument, you should take some time to debrief and reflect on the interaction. It can be particularly valuable. Now, once there's been an opportunity to cool off, partners can reflect on the argument through the lens of the skills they're working on and see what they might have done better or done differently. If the interaction was successful, examining why it worked and then congratulating each other on the good work is also very important. In fact, the review of positive, successful interactions might be even more important than reviewing the negative ones. These reviews can happen whenever it's convenient, especially the high fives for a success. But you can also save time during the weekly meeting, during which you can set aside 5 or 10 minutes for a State of the Union discussion. Some couples like to make the State of the Union discussion even more specific, and they'll take time to answer these following 3 questions. What is one thing that you as a couple did really well this past week? What's an area in which you struggled as a couple this past week? What's at least one thing each of you appreciated about the other this past week? These questions can help us pinpoint the successes and areas of improvement facing the couple, and they end with appreciation, which is something we always want to be working toward cultivating. Now, I realize by this point, we've talked a lot about talking a lot. The State of the Union, the debrief, the weekly meetings, the conflict resolution discussion questions, the antidotes to the 4 horsemen. In case it wasn't clear yet, effective communication is one of the most important parts of a successful relationship. But there may be a chance some of you out there are thinking, great, now we have all these wonderful tools, but we can barely talk at all without getting mad at each other. How do we even start? That brings us to a communication approach that might almost seem too simple, but it's a great technique that we can always fall back on when we find that we aren't successfully communicating with our partner. It's called the speaker-listener technique. Now, when we discussed the compromise questions before, we talked a lot about what should be done when someone was speaking or listening, but the specific speaker-listener technique is more foundational than that, although it can be used during the compromise discussions. The speaker-listener technique is a structured communication method that helps individuals engage in open and empathetic dialogue, and involves 2 essential roles, the speaker and the listener. The speaker is the one who has something to express. It might be concerns or emotions or thoughts. It's likely you'll both have something to express, in which case you'll take turns with one person being the speaker first and then the other person. When in the speaker role, it's crucial to be respectful and considerate to the listener. Don't attack while you're in the speaker role. Just calmly try to clearly and briefly convey your points. Also, don't try to mind read. Don't try to guess what the listener is thinking, and don't try to anticipate their counter arguments. The speaker holds the floor, which can be represented by any object, like a drink coaster, a pen, or some other figurative representation of speaking rights. Then we have the listener. The listener's role is to actively listen without interruption or judgment. So they want to try to really hear and understand what the speaker is saying. The listener's primary goal is to understand and validate the speaker's perspective, even if the listener disagrees. The listener doesn't formulate a response or counter argument until the speaker is finished speaking. During the conversations, we often will wait for our turn to talk and we don't fully listen. But in the speaker-listener approach, the listener needs to try to not be thinking ahead. So now that we understand the roles, how does this technique work? First, the speaker holds the floor and expresses their thoughts or feelings, focusing on only one point at a time. The listener then actively listens, making an effort to understand the speaker's viewpoint without interrupting the speaker. After the speaker finishes, the listener summarizes what they heard. This ensures that the speaker's message is clear. If the speaker feels the listener didn't fully understand, then the speaker can clarify, and the listener can again summarize. This can be repeated as often as possible or as often as necessary. Only when the listener correctly summarizes the speaker's message should the role switch, and the listener will then become the speaker. Pretty simple, right? But it really can be incredibly helpful when we're stuck in unsuccessful communication patterns. The technique can help us by promoting active listening and empathy and understanding. It can also make our discussions more calm and effective and efficient by reducing interruptions and emotional escalations during the discussions. It also provides a structured framework for resolving conflicts and addressing issues, and it allows both parties the opportunity to express themselves without fear of immediate judgment. So now I would like to invite two of my esteemed colleagues to join me, and we will do an example of using the speaker listener technique. So I've got Nathan and Pollock here joining me, and they are going to pretend to be a cohabitating couple that has been fighting quite a lot about whether or not they will get a dog. So let's start. So Nathan, I know that we've explained the speaker listener technique, and I'd like to see if you and Pollock could give it a try. If you'd be open to it, could you start with the speaker role and kind of explain your point kind of as clearly and concisely as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do my best to keep it concise. Yeah, I think we're ready to add a dog to our relationship and both have a dog. I grew up with dogs and found it always to add a lot of joy and love and be kind of this expansive experience for my family. And I also think it would be a great thing for us to explore having something that we have to take care of and care for, for future reference of, potentially having kids. So I just think it's something that would really be beneficial. And I think we're both really ready at this time to have a dog.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So Pollock, what I'd like you to do now as the listener is just kind of paraphrase what you heard Nathan say there.
Yeah. So, Nathan, I heard that you say that, you used to have a dog growing up and you feel like it would really kind of expand our life in a really positive way. And it would, give us an additional responsibility in case we want to have kids one day. So it could be a good responsibility for us to see how we kind of handle that. I also kind of heard you say that, maybe you don't feel like our relationship is enough and maybe we need more in our relationship. And so maybe that's why we need a dog.
Okay, thank you, Pollock. And so now, Nathan, I'd like to check in. Do you think that Pollock correctly kind of paraphrased what you were trying to convey to her?
I think part of it. So yes, I did grow up with a dog, and I do think it would be, beneficial for us to have. I don't feel that it's something that we're lacking in the relationship right now necessarily. Like I think that was a little bit off. I think more so, the relationship's great, and this is just going to be additive to the experience. So I don't think it's anything that we're missing by any means, or the relationship isn't in a good place right now. I just think this is something that would only benefit us.
Okay, thanks. So Pollock, did you hear kind of how Nathan clarified a little bit what his point was in the spot where he thought maybe you were misunderstanding him? Could you
Yeah.
phrase what you heard that time?
Yeah. So it sounds like I, wasn't accurate with part of what I said, that you don't feel like our relationship isn't enough and you just feel like this would be an additional positive feature to our relationship.
Yeah, how does that sound, Nathan? Does that seem accurate?
Yeah, that's much more spot on.
Okay, great. And so now we're going to switch roles, and Pollock will become the speaker and Nathan the listener. And if you were at home and you were together in the same spot, you might have something that was representing the floor. So you could say, hey, now you're the speaker. But we'll pretend that you've traded that off. And Pollock, could you please share kind of as clearly and concisely as you could your point of view on this?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. So I think my point of view is that a dog is a lot of responsibility. I'm really clean and I like our house clean. Dogs are messy, they shed, they have so much fur, and I just don't know how we would fit in the responsibility into our life. The walks, the food, the feedings, like all of that. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, thank you. And so Nathan, what did you hear Pollock say there?
Yeah, I think I heard her say, it's maybe something, an added responsibility that we don't have room for at the moment, as well as, something that will create a lot of mess. And in a household, I know we like to keep clean. But yeah, I think, there's doggy daycares for a reason, and there's, ways of making room for
Yeah.
responsibility.
Well, Nathan, I actually want to just kind of interrupt you for a second there. And so I appreciate how you're getting into the brainstorming of this and trying to find some compromise. But for the speaker listener, we're just going to try to understand each other's points. And then once we feel like we've understood those, then we can move on to finding compromise and kind of coming back with those counter arguments. But for this, it's just kind of that paraphrasing, that reiteration to make sure we understood. So thanks for thinking ahead. But Pollock, when you heard what Nathan said to summarize your point, what did you hear there?
Yeah, I think he overall understood what I was saying.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I want to thank you both for trying out this technique with me today, and hopefully, maybe next session, we can go into some of those great ideas that Nathan had there. And now outside of character, I want to thank you both for joining in today and giving that great presentation of the technique.
You got it.
So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and so, yeah, so what we saw there, and hopefully we noticed, and it was pointed out, where we had in the beginning, when Pollock was first paraphrasing while she was the listener, she heard what Nathan said, but read something more into it, that maybe he was saying there was something lacking in the relationship. And so he was able to reiterate his points to clarify that. And then Pollock paraphrased and was able to hear what he was really saying. And then when Nathan was paraphrasing what Pollock said, when he was a listener, he paraphrased, but then he started going into problem solver mode and started trying to reach compromises or come up with counter arguments to the points he heard her say. That's not part of the speaker listener technique. This is just so we can understand each other's points, and then we can move on to finding those resolutions. I also want to point out on this slide right here, this is actually something you could print out, you could hold, and it could represent the floor. And it has kind of the rules for the speaker listener technique. So it could be something that you could hold in your hands and could pass back and forth. And if somehow you kind of forget what each person's supposed to be doing, that could be there. And in my resources page, there's going to be a link to that if you'd like to find that and order it from a website or print it out for yourself. So yeah. So next, and not just because it's my job, I also want to recommend couples therapy. Couples therapy can be a safe, supportive place to examine tough issues and find compromise for perpetual conflicts, and to learn more skills and improve communication and connection. Whether you think you and your partner are in crisis mode, or you think you're totally crushing it as a team, chances are couples therapy could have something to offer to help you continue building on your strengths, improve your communication, and become closer as a couple. I'll include a few links about exploring couples therapy in the resources at the end of the presentation. Well, that brings us to the end of the formal presentation, and I want to thank you for joining us today. You can find more information about us at our website, mytherapynyc.com, and there's my contact information, and you can find us on Instagram. But I'd also like to open up the floor to any questions that we might have. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and kind of look at the chat. And if you'd like to enter any questions there, I also have some people who kind of emailed questions ahead of time and some other questions that have come up. So feel free to put some in the chat. And I think kind of as we have some potentially joining there, I'll talk about some of the ones that were emailed first. So one person asked, so you said that the 4 horsemen predict a relationship ending. Is there a point of no return that a couple might reach and just should give up? That's a great question. Whether there's a point of no return and you should just give up. As long as a couple, in my experience, I mean, there's no hard and fast rules with this, but as long as a couple wants to work and wants to try to make things get better, then there is hope and there is possibility. As we talked about kind of before, relationships are a lot of work. I mean, we put in tons of work for our jobs or our hobbies, but relationships, some of the most important things to us, they take a lot of work. And so you may be at a point where it's going to take even more work, where you're going to have to really spend a lot of time working together. But if both partners is invested, I don't think that there necessarily is a point of no return. If you've reached that point where you don't care anymore, where the contempt or the resentment has built up too much, it may be tough. And you would have to ask yourself if you really want to be in the relationship anymore and are willing to put in the work. But if you are, I think there could be a good shot. I see people asking if there'll be more of these webinars. Yeah, we have these, every few months. We have a lot that are previously recorded ones that are also on YouTube and that you can find through our website. We also regularly have written and video blogs. So we have all sorts of content that we have out there and that we'd like to invite any of our viewers today to take a look at. And also, we will be sending recordings of the webinar to anyone who attended or signed up for it. So you'll get to see that recording. So another question, and feel free to put some in the chat, but another one we got ahead of time for someone who couldn't be here. So regarding the antidote to criticism, so that's using the I feel statements, the person says the partner and they and their partner keep trying to use the I feel statements, but they often still seem like criticism. They gave an example. I feel like you're so inconsiderate. That's not correct, right? Correct. So we have to be careful when we're using an I feel statement that we're really talking about a feeling that we're having. So I feel rushed. I feel disconnected. I feel maybe unappreciated, but we don't want to be, I feel you're mean. I feel you're thoughtless. I feel you're self-centered. That's just a you statement with I feel in front of it. And so we want to make sure that we are really talking about a feeling that we're having and then tying that to a need. Another great thing about using these I feel statements is, it kind of almost helps your argument. We can argue with facts, but feelings, if you feel that way, you feel that way. And it'll be important for you and your partner to get to the bottom of that feeling together. So we want to make sure we're really using those I feel statements, saying I feel an emotion or some kind of way, some kind of feeling, and then follow that by some need that you can work toward addressing or finding with the help of your partner as you try to collaborate and find compromise. Yeah. Are there any other questions or thoughts or things you might be wondering about? Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone who attended today. It was really great to have you all here. I hope you found something helpful, and please don't hesitate to reach out to me or reach out to the practice if you have any questions, or if you're curious about maybe exploring if you would like individual therapy or couples therapy. And we definitely would be happy to answer any questions and kind of help you get set up with that. When will you be receiving the recording? I think, next week. So keep your eyes peeled to the email address you signed up for this with, and that should be coming then. Yeah. All right. Well, I want to be mindful of everyone's time and let you go on to any meetings or any other things you have planned for today. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And thank you for spending part of your Friday the 13th with us.